There it was, that path I've always wanted to travel down. I always loved hiking, and these woods had many beaten paths that just begged to be explored. I've been down many of them. Some had gorgeous views and others were nothing more than spots that some nature-loving couples use for obvious sexual activity, judging by the discarded wrappers and occasional lost pieces of clothing. But this place had to be different. At least I hope so. It was a long hike to get there, and it took me long enough to build the stamina to travel so far. Months upon months of exercise made my endurance much better, and I would rarely get short of breath, unless I was sprinting for long distances. I looked better than I did the previous months, for sure, not only that, but now I was in a peak of physical condition. I always wanted to look on how I did at that point. I had lean muscle and I was curvy all right places. The gut I despised had finally shrunken down to oblivion. I'd be damned if I let it return. After all, that woman wants to be fat and unhealthy. But enough about that. Let's get back to the path. As I was saying, this place was beautiful. The trees seemed older, the air seemed fresher, and the canopy bit above was so thick, hardly a sunbeam would pass through. The path itself seemed old, and it carried an air of mystery that seemed to lure me in. I remember each time I would walk and catch a sight of it, it always seemed to call to me. Though I was very tempted, I knew that if I explored it then, I would be too exhausted to walk back out and get in my car to drive home. That is, until now. I was ready this time. That beckoning path seemed to lead me into nothing but pure darkness. But I knew there had to be more than that. There were probably all kinds of beautiful things waiting in that thick foliage, just waiting to be discovered. My curiosity always got the best of me. It was time to explore. The trees were gigantic. They seemed to be nearly ancient. I knew some had to be hundreds of years old. Moss climbed up some of their trunks, only to seeming to increase their age. The place seemed to be untouched by the human hands, if not for the scraggly trail. It seemed as though the nature would overtake the bare dirt once again soon. For some reason, though, the occasional shiver would tease at the hairs on my back of my neck, making them stand on end. It wasn't cold at all, though. It was at least 70 degrees Fahrenheit outside. So why did I feel so cold? I shrugged it off and decided to put on my hooded jacket I was carrying in my backpack. I searched the area, just soaking with the natural beauty of the forest. Only then I realized that the canopy formed from the outside stretched branches was so thick that beams of sunlight could come in and were very hardly any more than thin fingers that barely illuminated the path. I paused. Did I just hear breathing? I held my breath, checking to see if it was just my own. That seemed to be the case. I only laughed at myself for being so paranoid. But that chill returned as I forced a light-hearted chuckle. My instincts were trying to take control. They were telling me to turn around and go back. They were telling me that something was horribly wrong and they wanted to safety of the sunlight. I was an idiot. I pushed it all the way. I disregarded those things as paranoia. Just then, I saw a lumbering figure a few yards away, easily 9 feet tall. Through I only caught a glimpse. It seemed human, or at least a man. It passed behind a tree, and I saw no other sign of it. Needless to say, it scared the hell out of me. There were no apes, or for that matter, any primates that fit the description matching what I had just seen in that area. There was a zoo nearby, but it wouldn't have been all over the news if something had broken loose. I tried to convince myself that I was just seeing things, but it wasn't working at all. My mind traveled back to the thoughts of Bigfoot, and how so many jokes were made about it only exists in blurry out of focus areas, or that he or she was just seeing someone's excessively hairy hippie relative. I didn't laugh though. I couldn't bring myself to. That invasive feeling of being watched was ever so present. I was being monitored? Now visibly was damn near gone. Why did I want to keep pressing forth? I was hoping to discover something? I still didn't know why I did that. I broke out my flashlight, shining around the thicket of trees, only to make a fascinating discovery. There were carvings on the trees. Some of the bark was peeled off, and some of the primitive carvings were inlaid in the wood. What struck me as odd was that much of art I saw resembled out of the art evolution. But one thing unnerved me gratefully: the final stage, human beings as we know them, was missing. Did this mean we were being as myth- mythological to Sasquatch as they are to us? I took a step forward to view the carved image a little more closely. A branch cracked beneath me, only causing me to let out a startled yelp. This had to be a joke. I had to see what was behind this. I continued. The terrain began to grow a little more difficult to climb, but I knew I had to know. That was either my best or worst trait. If something intrigues me or interests me, I must get to the bottom of it, even if it's the last thing I do. I certainly don't feel that way anymore. Soon, I felt that chill again. I was being watched, and that was clear. Rustling sounds weren't heard, but maybe whatever was watching me had lived there since the beginning of its time. One thing to begin to confuse me, though, was another source of light that was nearby. There was a dull yellow glow to it. It appeared someone had made fire nearby. Maybe I could ask them for help on finding my way out? I was definitely lost by now, and it was probably dark, even outside of the woods. At this hour, I could also smell the meat cooking. The only reminded me of how long it had been since I had a good meal. I turned off my flashlight and followed in the dim light. I decided to look into this further, walking as quietly as I could until the fire came to a sight. It was rather small fire, but what I saw still frightened me. There was a whole group of these Simad bipads, lifting, fitting the classical description of Sasquatch, gathered around the fire. They seemed to communicate in grunts and guttural vocalizations. But it wasn't so much of their presence that frightened me. It was the meat they were preparing. A sharpened stick was driven through the meat that had once been two human legs, arms, and a torso. The head had appeared to be missing. The grunts suggested they were communicating, but I found myself stumbling backwards in terror. My flight reflex was taking over, and I could bear fight my instincts as much as I want to. Earlier, but this time I couldn't let them take control. My heart was racing in fear, and I spun around. Only one way left. I was going back the way I came. Now with my flashlight to guide me, I had to find my way out. Running on adrenaline alone, I was terrified, but I knew that getting out of here could be a life or death situation. Once I had made it back to the strange carvings, something made my heart feel, though, as it was about to leap through my chest. Leaves and branches were snapping. I was standing still. This only made me start running again, faster this time. But was there any hope for me? Whatever it was knew this forest better than I did, and there was no time to me to summon up a little plan to outsmart this thing. All I could do was hope, and I was in the better shape than it was. It was in pursuit of me, but unfortunately I seemed to be a step ahead. There was no way I could lose it in the forest, but at least if I made it back to civilization, it would probably flee after all. What's more dangerous to a beast than a group of intelligent prey? I could see an opening to the path I had entered from, and somehow it was just barely light outside. The fiery glow from the sunset was still lighting the sky, casting a tangerine glow over everything in my sight. I would have taken pleasure in the beauty of it if I wasn't so positive I was being chased. My legs were carrying me as fast as they could, and I was finally into the clearing and onto the beaten trail that others before me had worn. If I had knew everything right now, it was that I shouldn't look back, and I had to keep running to find my way to the car and drive home. I didn't even listen to find out if I was still being followed. My red sedan came into sight, and I quickly swung my bag off one arm and tucked the keys from outside my pocket, unlocking the vehicle and getting inside, just hoping I heard nothing before peeling out of the stretch to the country road that led me there. I saw one thing in my rearview mirror window: a bipedal summon, a key to the missing link. covered in dark hair and slopping forehead before it could be seen baring its teeth as if were to challenging me. When the engine of my vehicle started and I revved the motor, the primitive beast fled in what might have been terror. It was a quiet drive back home. After I finally got a chance to get inside my house and relax, I began to realize something. Sasquatch or Bigfoot, whatever you are, to call this apparent missing link from between humans and their semen cousins, were always thought to be peaceful. But several people disappear every year and they are never found. Yes, there are many report sightings of such beings, but did you ever think they haven't been collected by scientists and researched because so few of them have lived to tell them about it? I didn't know if I'm correct, but human remains roasting over that fire suggest that I am. Is it possible that this strange race is jealous of humanity or for its advanced technology? I may never know, but I can tell you one thing. I'm not about to return to that path to find out.
What's up, my pretties? It's the Lion Queen here. I want to appreciate you all for tuning into this video, and I do appreciate you guys supporting my video by giving this video likes and stuff. If you really enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like, comment and subscribe if you're new, ring the bell for notifications to when I upload so that way you guys will get updated for whenever I upload. If you want to follow me on Twitter or DeviantArt, feel free to leave a follow on those if you are interested in following me on those socials. If you want to support my backup channel, known as Miss Dark Shigo, feel free to subscribe to it, as a link to that will also be in the About page section. And with that being said, and that being the case, thank you so much for watching, my pretties, and as always, please stay pretty.